Good morning. Today I'm going to do a 10-minute teardown of Madrona Venture Group's some website pages for them. What a teardown is a 5 to 10 minute quick review of copy, content, kind of structure and strategy related to how a firm shares their brand, how they establish their brand, and how they use their site or another piece of content or copy to reinforce their messaging and establish a narrative that matters to the founders or investors that they are targeting. I do this regularly for VCs and private equity firms and technology companies, so I thought it'd be helpful to kind of pull you into just a brief review of how I think about copy and content by looking at some key pages. So first, let's look at the About page. About page is a popular place for all site visitors to go. It's one of the top 3 pages ultimately where a visitor will land. So let's talk about why this matters here. First, VCs need to differentiate, right? Cash is a commodity in most markets, and good deals, solid founders with investable companies, they ultimately will have sort of their pick potentially of VCs. So firms need to really do the heavy lifting of differentiating. Now it takes courage because differentiation requires that you plant your flag and be about something, right? It's easy to have generic site copy that sounds and looks like everybody else because it's the safe thing, but it ultimately won't seed in your market a view of you that's different, one that will actually be compelling to someone to ultimately get on board to do deals with you. Madrona's obviously has had a lot of success. They've worked with and had exits with Amazon, Redfin, Snowflake, I believe, and others. But they've really owned sort of the Northwest geography, the market. And they've done a lot of, enterprise cloud and early stage Series A type stuff. Now, as you read this, though, let's look at the About page. So we see some statement about value-added services, right? Okay. Now, every firm is effectively going to have something similar to this. Now, every founder will also expect that their investors offer strategic communications, recruiting, they make intros and have operations, things like that, access to resources. So there's really nothing that differentiating about this. Where I would encourage them to take this to the next step is don't just make these just descriptions of what strategic communications is. So if you say that you've got a PR pro with over 20 years of experience, what have they done, right? So establish the value and the benefit to the founder here. Use either an illustrative example or something specific. Have you helped a data company navigate a data breach or some sort of crises, or have you put an early stage company on the cover of Forbes, right? So what does that strategic communications actually deliver, right? So then also I would talk about up here our role as venture capitalists. This is the first thing. This is sort of like your hero statement on this page. Is something in there unique to Madrona? Okay, because when I read this again, it's fairly generic, fairly benign. You're the heart and soul of what you do is act as strategic board members and advisors, right? So you define strategy, you help hire the best teams, you connect to customers and partners. Again, these are all things that somebody would expect a firm to do. So it doesn't mean you have to exclude them, but how are you actually different, right? And I would encourage you to just plant your flag around something. If it's the geographic expertise, call it out, right? If it's stage expertise, call it out. If it's industry, business model expertise, call it out. You need to do that to establish kind of trust and credibility. Okay. So, and then the other thing I would do is down here is you have this our investors. So now all of a sudden you kind of pivot messaging or pivot audience, and you start talking to ostensibly here LPs and others that might want to invest with you. So you don't have to kind of awkwardly bolt on this section. I would talk about, I would consider, even 2 sections of your site. Why don't you bifurcate audiences and be able to have more nuanced messaging, because you go after founders and you go after investors. So there might be a way, even on the homepage, to direct or shape a path of how one of these 2 audiences will view your site. Okay. The other thing here is statements like this, just making a statement saying a thriving ecosystem. there's nothing in there that's drawing me in to read that paragraph, right? So to either take it out if it doesn't matter, or if the benefit is a deep network, then talk about a deep network. Talk about how you have allowed entrepreneurs to connect in ways that are additive to their business, in maybe in a more compelling way, right? So you can offer some social proof. Why don't you have quotes from a few founders that have found your connections in the Pacific Northwest and beyond to be meaningful to their business? Okay, so think about doing that. I will say I like this up here. I like this type of statement because it is founder centered, right? I know that one of Madrona's mission or value statements is that they want to be helpful. They're collaborative. They are in their founders' corners. And so when they start with something that is you or reader centered, you have a vision that will help you make it real. It's better than we make your vision real, right? Because then it takes the emphasis or the thrust of the statement on the firm versus on the reader. Okay, so that's just some brief feedback there. I want to look also at the news and views page in the next couple of minutes here. The reason VCs and a lot of investors are starting to publish more is because they need to establish trust and credibility. They need to be seen as a viable partner for founders, right? That trust and credibility comes through publishing. Really, there is no other way to do it. Yes, you can have you can do deals, and that certainly helps. You can build relationships inside the ecosystem with lawyers and other partners, things like that. Bankers, but one of the ways to do it is to put yourself out there, add some humanity to the firm, right? So that when somebody thinks about Madrona, they think about the podcast they listened to, or the TED Talk that was given, or the sort of the tell-all guide that was crafted, right? Things like that. So this news and views page is really interesting, and it's certainly going to be somewhere where I, as a reader, am going to head. But let's just look at the page briefly. This page is incredibly busy, and what happens is there's some good stuff here that gets lost because I don't have a clear path to engage this page at all. I like the feature at the top. Consider some white space around it for sure. The other thing I would do here is, this is great. If you as a firm are featuring your portfolio companies, really feature them, because that is going to send a message to somebody looking at this that, oh yes, Madrona is behind some of the coolest deals. They get their companies in the news. They are continually closing deals. They're continuing exiting or doing follow-on funding, whatever it is, right? So feature these in a more interesting way. I would probably collapse some of these articles here too. We have 10 or 12 of them. So do 2 or 3, maybe have a featured one. And consider pulling out some of the tags and the social share buttons, things like that, just to make it visually a little bit easier. Now, let me call your attention here also down here. So founded and funded. I did a little bit of digging, and I saw that Madrona started a podcast about a year ago, it looks like. Founded and funded sounds really interesting. But as I click on this, I am taken into essentially a transcript of this conversation. Okay, so you're asking a lot, right? From a time investment standpoint for somebody to either read through, let's say an hour-long transcript that's in my writing, I think that's somewhere in the the neighborhood of 20, 25 pages, right, of text. So that's a big ask. Also, whether this listening to this for an hour even is a big ask. What you need to do is show me what I'm going to learn and tell me why that matters. Okay. Whether it's by agitating some pains I have or just putting something intriguing here, give me the top 2 or 3 takeaways from this, okay? And profile this podcast. This is a significant investment of your resources. So this, I would expect to have a little bit higher billing on this page for sure. Talk about the benefit of the podcast, talk about the candid conversations, talk about the key takeaways. If somebody can sit and listen to a conversation between a investor and a CEO of a company that just closed the $15 million Series A, like there's a lot to learn there, especially for somebody that's operating in the AIML space. Then profile this a little bit more, right? So don't bury this on the page. Okay, I am not aware enough, and this is important. I'm not aware enough to care about this to click, because I don't necessarily know who OctoML is, but I do know the pains I have. I do know the problems I'm running into. I do know that these conversations could be valuable for me, but you just need to show me how and why. Okay, so I would carve out the founded and funded content, and I would really emphasize that a little bit more. Okay, so that is the news and views page. Again, there could be other things to be added here. I know that Madrona just came out with this up here, this back to work strategy toolkit. The orange kind of header up there is helpful, but if that is a solid piece, and I know that you've had some conversations with other sales leaders and other investors to pull that together, that's a really valuable piece that needs to live in a more prominent position on this page. And it certainly should, if we go back to the home page, it certainly should live in a more prominent place here too. The way that readers are going to engage is we're going to look at the top, we're going to jump down, right? We're going to jump back up. So if you're trying to drive traffic to that piece, then I would consider including it in a few other places. It's great to see here, just because we're here on the home page, that Madrona talks about their Northwest roots running deep. Okay, so if somebody cares about doing business in the Northwest, Madrona is going to be probably the firm for them. So let's play that up, right? If you want to own this segment of the geography, then that should be really emphasized. Okay, so that's it. If you have questions or if you want to meet me, you can connect with me on my website at www.charliew.co. Thanks.